How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana Del Relte. Chapter 34. Plo Koon. Plo Koon came out of hyperspace to a recorded message from his former master, Dvoka, a long text message detailing a new mission to Mandalore, and the text of a romance novel. He had just spent several months on Dorin, training with the Barando, his planet's own Force-sensitive tradition, and was suddenly feeling very out of the loop. He set the hyperspace coordinates to Mandalore, but decided to listen to the message before he jumped, in case it needed an immediate response. Plo, I hope this message finds you well. There have been multiple developments over the past few months while you were gone. The Mandalorians have had a change of heart regarding the Jedi, and the romance novel is the key. You will need to read it before you arrive on Mandalore.
And that was certainly an unusual request.
Well, as you have read it, I would ask you to meditate on what you have learned about the Mandalorians and how they relate to the Jedi. I will contact you when you reach Mandalore, so we can speak in person. May the Force be with you, my most troublesome Padawan. Dvoka liked to joke that Plo was the worst Padawan he had ever taught. Unfortunately for him, Plo had met his Padawan brothers and sisters and knew he was the best behaved of the lot. Plo sent the ship into hyperspace and settled in to read the book. A few hours later he finished, then sunk into a light meditation on the novel. He liked it a lot. He had never quite realized how caring Mandalorians were of their children and their loves. Plus, the plot of a lone Jedi finding and protecting a child with the help of a secretly soft-hearted Mandalorian appealed to him. He wondered if any other Jedi had found the book appealing. The Force prodded him to ask the opposite question. How many Mandalorians have found the Jedi appealing after reading this book? Enough to change thousands of years of enmity, apparently. He came out of meditation and turned his attention to his mission briefing. The new Mandalorians had reached out to the Senate to ask for help with their disappearing children. They accused the true Mandalorians and Death Watch of kidnapping them from the city of Sundari, which is where the new Mandalorians were based. Plo scrolled further through the file to the background on the new Mandalorians, since he had never heard of them. They were a subsect of Mandalorian culture founded centuries ago in protest against the massacres and atrocities being committed by the more standard warmongering Mandalorians of the time. This seemed to Plo like a worthy goal, until he reached the footnote which explained that this protest included rejecting not just the fighting armor and weapons of the traditional Mandalorians, but also their entire culture, including their language. Having just finished reading The Mandalorian's Dilemma, Plo found himself reacting with more distaste than he'd have expected. To take the step to reject the entirety of your culture because of the wrongs you believed were committed in its name was admirable, but he doubted most Mandalorians saw it that way. After a moment's reflection, Plo realized he didn't see it as admirable either. If the Moon Mandalorians were rejecting their culture, that meant that family and clan ties weren't being maintained, and they weren't taking care of and adopting children from outside of their blood ties. Were the new Mandalorians only asking for help now that their own children were being targeted? Would Plo arrive to discover that there were many more missing children who the new Mandalorians didn't care about because they weren't blood-related? He had a bad feeling that this was the case. Either way, Plo would have to be mindful of his biases around the new Mandalorians during this mission. Contrary to the Senate's request, however, the Jedi Council had told him to contact the Mandalore Jasta Meril before talking to the new Mandalorians. Master Dooku had reported that the true Mandalorians following Meril had also been suffering from child abductions a few years before, and those abductions had been traced back to Death Watch. Plo settled in to spend the rest of the trip reading the large file on Mandalorian history he found embedded in the mission background briefing. As they came out of hyperspace around Mandalore over 2 days later, Plo set his fighters' coordinates for Keldabe, the capital city. Nared let his eyes roam over Hiam as he ducked back into the cave where they were sheltering. Kiri was a warm weight against his chest, her face hidden, though he didn't think she was sleeping, just died from her panic attack. Hiam's robes were a series of brown colors which worked well as camouflage in the desert, but also made it hard to see if Hiam was injured. "Are you all right?" Nared asked. He could be sure that at least Hiam's chest had been protected by Nared's armor. He stood up, making sure to support Kiri, though she made a whimper of protest at the move. He needed a closer look. "We should probably move. At least one escaped," said Hyam. He was grabbing their meager supplies. "You didn't answer my question." Hyam sighed. "I'm mildly injured, but it's nothing I can't heal once we change locations." "Let's move then," said Nared, twisting with Kiri still in his arms to duck out the narrow cave entrance. Hyam shadowed him, taking up Nared's usual spot of guarding their backs since Nared held Kiri. An hour later, they stopped in the shadows of some tall pillars of stone. Nared made sure Kiri had some water before ordering Hyam to strip. He ignored Hyam's raised eyebrow and his own blush. Once the jetties' tunics were off, Nared's armor breastplate was finally visible. Closer inspection revealed there were tiny particles of metal scattered across the left side, along with barely visible scorch marks on the surrounding brown fabric. Nared touched it, gloves coming away covered in a powdered metal. "What happened?" "Caught a slug thrower on my lightsaber. It's splattered across my chest." Yam's eyes were warm. "Your armor protected me." Nared couldn't resist giving him a kiss, even as his hands worked to get the armor and the fabric below it off. There were trails of bright red-brown burns on the skin, radiating out from the edge of where the armor had sat. "You can heal it?" Nared asked. They had some basic medical supplies, but he also remembered Hyam's healing of his sunburn. "Yes, though perhaps you could feed Kiri what I do. It's hard to focus while you're devouring me with your eyes." Hyam wiggled his eyebrows. Kiri giggled softly, though her eyes were filled with tears at seeing the injuries. Nared realized that was probably why Hyam wanted him to distract her with food. "Take your time, Sade," he said. Hyam granted him one last warm smile before closing his eyes in meditation.